I just wanted to let you know I'm here. Good afternoon, and welcome. Welcome to Sharing the Sun, Accessing Solar Energy for Sustainable, Affordable Housing and Just Equitable Communities. My name is Heather Raspberry, and I have the privilege of serving as HAND's Executive Director, and we are really excited to have all of you join us today. Many of you who have been attending HAND's programs over the last year know that we always kick off with the timer in honor of George Floyd. HAND has been on a 7-year journey to center racial equity in all that we do, and today's program illustrates yet another example of how our members can center equity and justice through solar energy. Today, you are in for a really informative session with a number of industry leaders who will share strategies that you can use to harness the sun while providing economic and environmental benefits to communities that we serve. And is grateful to collaborate on today's session with our member, New Partners Community Solar. You'll hear from their leadership later in today's program. And we also want to thank and shout out all of our speakers, many of whom are also members, for taking their time and sharing their insights and expertise in today's program. So many thanks to all of you. If you've registered for the session, you will have received an agenda that also has bios and headshots of all of our speakers. We have a jam-packed program, so just hoping to make all of that seamless for you, be able to get right into the program. So with that, I will now turn things over to Dr. Teresa Lawrence, who is the Deputy Director of DC's Department of Energy and the Environment, who we're excited to have with us today and kicking us off. So with that, I'll turn things over.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you to HAND and the entire team for inviting me here today to share with you in this important event. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. The themes highlighted at today's event reflect the ideals of the district as it relates to clean energy, affordability, resilience, equity, environmental justice, and inclusive prosperity. Director Tommy Wells sends his regrets. Unfortunately, he was called away at the last minute, but I'm pleased to bring you these remarks on his behalf. This event is happening at just the right time with organizations whose mission it is to house the residents of our community. It is such important work that you do, and I'd like to connect it to the great work that we do at the Department of Energy and Environment, or DOEE, to help improve and safeguard our environment in the district. The district is a national leader in a variety of areas, including green building, Energy Star and LEED rated properties, solar deployment, and events such as these elevate the importance of these issues and help put us on a path to true sustainability. If we can move to the next slide. The next slide shows the solar trends in the last few years. DOEE has been working on solar access for income qualified households for many years. With that in mind, I want to share with you 3 great reasons that organizations that you represent should go solar. First, it can save you money that you can use to support the other important work that you are doing in the community. Energy affordability is a critical issue in the district. Solar is one way to bring households' energy costs down. Solar access not only decreases household utility burdens, but also increases the overall housing affordability. If you can move to the next slide. This slide shows the importance of solar renewable energy credits, or SRECs, in helping to finance solar. The district provides the most generous incentives to go solar in the country. As a result, you are potentially leaving thousands of dollars a year on the table if you do not go solar. So this just provides some of the pricing points that we typically refer to. And finally, if you can go to the next slide. Solar aligns with your mission to serve low and moderate income district residents. Our Solar for All program is designed to serve low and moderate income residents who otherwise do not have the upfront capital needed to go solar on their own. And Solar for All facilitates the opportunity to benefit from solar through savings on their electric bills of around $500 annually. Solar for All also aims to help achieve our aggressive clean energy goal of increasing the use of renewables to 100%, with 10% of our energy sourced from solar in the city. The residents you serve can benefit directly from this program. And through our contract with the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, or DCSEU, we offer a rebate to solar projects and developers that want to serve LMI customers, the low to moderate income customers, which can help to support your plans to go solar. Several nonprofit housing developers in the district have already taken advantage of this opportunity, and we would like to see more do so as well. DCSCU works very hard to secure host sites for solar installation of community solar systems. Community solar is key, and it allows residents to save on their electricity bills even if they do not have a roof to install solar. Subscribers can receive the benefits of solar from systems located anywhere in the district. This is very important for community reinvestment. And lastly, we all know climate change is very real. And as we saw in recent events around the country, it can cause a lot of disruption to our lives, especially to our most vulnerable residents. Mayor Bowser has pledged to make Washington, D.C. carbon neutral and climate resilient by 2050. In support of this climate imperative, other key district initiatives include Clean Energy DC, which is the district's climate mitigation plan, and Climate Ready DC, which is the district's climate adaptation plan. Solar is an opportunity to address the causes of climate change and make our city a more resilient place to live by helping to generate our own power that we can use during climate events. So I hope you will join in our efforts to make the district a carbon-free and regenerative city. Going solar makes sense, aligns with the great work you are already doing, and is just the right thing to do. So DOEE appreciates the work that all of you are doing for our great city. Thank you. So with that, I'll now turn things over to Jeff Lesk, President and co-founder of New Partners Community Solar. Jeff?
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence. It's great to see you. And I want to first of all thank Han for inviting New Partners Community Solar to partner with you and your members on what is an extremely important mission for the affordable housing industry and the sustainability industry and the ways that we can come together. And Dr. Lawrence, I want to thank you and Director Wells and your staffs. The Department of Energy and Environment in DC has been an incredible partner to all of us who are trying mightily to improve the environment, improve the lives of DC residents, particularly those of innermost vulnerable communities. And we're very proud to be co-presenting on behalf of myself, my co-founder Herb Stevens, our executive director, Sasha Srivastava. We're delighted to be here and talk about the concept of environmental justice and how you as industry members can join us to the extent that you're not already doing it, and help us on our mission, which aligns so well with the district Solar for All program. When Herb and I formed New Partners Community Solar, we didn't even have the concept of environmental justice remotely on our minds. I was managing partner of Nixon Peabody's DC office. I was charged with locating and outfitting our new office. And all I really wanted to do was create the greenest law office in the country, the greenest, one of the most green offices in the city of DC. And I really wanted solar on the rooftop. Herb at the time was the firm's chief innovation officer, the first that we had. And he was charged with just making the firm a place that was led by innovation in our practices and in our relationships with the community. And so somehow together we ended up developing what became the first community solar project in Washington, DC. It took a lot of help from Nixon Peabody lawyers who provided services on a pro bono basis, and a lot of partners. And when we did that, we first just did a project. It was the rooftop on Nixon Peabody's office. But that project led to more projects and many more projects, many more partnerships. And where we started thinking of what we did as the intersection between sustainability and affordable housing, it has grown into something much larger and much more important. And that is this concept of environmental justice. Because through this 501c3 nonprofit that we formed, New Partners Community Solar, we began to see that it was really much more important. And what we did aligns with what we think are three of the most important, and some people would say existential issues of our time. It's climate change, income inequality, and social justice. That's become much more important to us, just as it has for HAND and the membership of HAND. And environmental justice is a way that we can address that. And at its core, that's what this program is all about. This is really hard work, and we have to move the needle. Those are three huge issues. The membership is doing a lot of that already, but we can and need to do more. And if there's any industry that's positioned to do this, it's the affordable housing industry. We collectively do really hard deals. We do incredible work with crazy quilt of programs and financing structures and regulatory regimes. And somehow, just drawn by our mission, we're able to not just build affordable housing, but build great affordable housing. And affordable housing that does much more than just house our residents, but improves their lives more generally. And that's what we want to talk about today. We want to provide you with some education to learn about what solar is about, how it's developed and financed. And we want to, most importantly, tell you how you can do this in a way that will directly benefit your resident populations. It is all about getting the benefits of sustainability into a program that not only improves the environment, but improves the lives of our most vulnerable stakeholders. We have an incredible faculty to help us do that, and we hope you enjoy today's program. And to start things off, I'm going to turn it over to my co-founder and partner, Herb Stevens, who will be moderating the first panel. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Herb Stevens. I have to first say that, oh yes, okay, now I can see everybody. It's great to be here. Thank you, Jeff. It's been a real pleasure to spend these last 5 years with Jeff and now Sasha, working with all affordable housing developers all through the city, as well as solar developers and the government and consultants. And our first panel is going to be very practical, I think. We are going to hear first from Krista Egger, who will give us a national perspective on affordable housing and sustainability, and also on solar energy as part of that. Then if the scheduling or scheduler permits, when we talked about it at our pre-call, we'd like to hear from Darian Crimmin, who is Vice President of Sustainability at Wynn Company. As you all know, Wynn is one of the largest affordable housing developers in the country, if not the largest. And we thought we'd go right into the practical element of how an affordable housing developer like Wynn went solar. Then we'll hear from Pranay Kohli, consultant to the Department of Energy and international expert on putting solar sort of almost anywhere in the district, and Gary Skulnick, who has done so much in Maryland to advocate for and promote and run now a sustainability company called Neighborhood Sun in Maryland. So that's our panel. Let me turn it first then over to Krista Eggers, who's Vice President of Green Communities at Enterprise Community Development. One of the things I was really interested in is that Krista led the technical rollout and development of the whole 2015 and 2020 Enterprise Green Communities criteria. Now, if I remember right, Enterprise's Green Community was literally the first and the biggest in the country at developing sustainability criteria for going green, particularly as it relates to the communities of affordable housing, the many communities and stakeholders we provide. It's a great counterpart to LEED. LEED though doesn't do a lot of what Enterprise Community Partners does in this area. And I'd really love to hear from Krista about how nationally she sees the affordable housing movement, if you will, going solar.
Great. Thank you, Herb. I'm really pleased to be here today, honored to be one of the speakers amongst all of the amazing guests we have here. So I'm happy to paint a little bit of a picture about the environment in which my co-panelists' solar finance and development journeys are really occurring here, and some of that national flavor of what we're seeing. So as Herb mentioned, my organization is Enterprise Community Partners. We're a national nonprofit focused in the affordable housing space, and we're on a mission to make home and community places of pride, power, and belonging for all. And I thought I'd start by bringing everybody back about 20 years. So imagine yourselves in the early 2000s. So back then, Enterprise as an affordable housing intermediary was starting to hear from dozens of affordable housing providers across the country that we work with, that there was a great desire to build more sustainable homes, to harness the sun, if you will, but there was a lack of a path. Like, how do you do this? How do you find a qualified workforce to help you implement? How do you overcome the institutional barriers, capital barriers? So we committed as an organization to start looking more closely at those barriers and co-create solutions with experts from around the country. So back in 2004, we launched this $555 million effort to green affordable housing, aiming for at least 8,500 homes in 5 years, and to test the premise of whether or not the words green and affordable was really the match that we envisioned. And it's, no punchline to anyone on this call that that has been a tremendous success. You know, the appetite to explore strategies like installing solar or subscribing to community solar plans that really help ensure long-term affordability is such a great mission match for the affordable housing sector. The national cost studies that we've produced have shown relatively minimal upfront cost increases and relatively short, simple payback periods. Studies that we've done regionally have shown the impact of health of residents living in green properties has been statistically significant in reducing asthmagens and other factors that contribute to high healthcare costs. So it's really this trifecta. So we've continued for the past 20 plus years. We've doubled down on exploring these barriers about education, incapacity, institutional barriers, and capital barriers. Our Green Communities program is still the only national green building program geared exclusively towards the affordable housing sector. We've helped scale policy incentives throughout the country. Today, 3/4 of the country's housing finance agencies either require or incentivize that their housing credit properties meet a third-party green building standard. And we've really honed in on what does it mean to be green? You know, ultimately to us, it means housing that's three things: healthy, efficient, and environmentally responsible. And that those three co-benefits are really critical to maximizing all of our precious investments in affordable housing. And so while most of our work has been focused on that holistic approach, we've spun off initiatives that focus on specific aspects of green affordable housing development, and solar is one of those areas. So, you know, from installing panels to cover owner-paid utility expenses, to broadened approaches through PPAs, and more recently with community solar agreements as well. Enterprise has financed solar, notably with National Housing Trust here in the district, Denver Housing Authority as well. We've also provided pre-development technical assistance for affordable housers who are exploring whether and how to harness the sun on existing properties, working through the myriad of technical, legal, and financial steps to ensure success. And this is still an area which I think deserves more attention and streamlined support for this to scale as much as we would like. Through the Action Coalition, we're supporting tax changes to eliminate the basis reduction for housing credit properties that claim solar and or energy efficiency tax credits, making it easier and more compelling to combine them. And we're proud to be among the largest affordable housing owners of rooftop solar in the district, with more than 1 megawatt of a distributed system throughout our enterprise community development portfolio. So there's been a tremendous amount of work over the past 20 years. And, you know, as Jeff was mentioning at the start, today, our housing affordability, climate, and racial equity challenges are each exacerbating threats to quality of life for our communities. And we really see that investing in energy efficiency and in solar rather than in fossil fuels in affordable housing can really help address those threats in a cost-effective way. And we really see healthy, efficient, affordable homes as an essential component of environmental justice. And I wanted to give just a couple of stories or stats to back that up. You all may be familiar with this, but according to the Union of Concerned Scientists, here in DC, we've historically had 5 days a year with temperatures above 100 degrees. Mid-century, that number is expected to be 37 days a year. And by the end of the century, here in DC, we expect to have 65 days a year with temperatures above 100. Needless to say, we have to design and retrofit the housing stock now to ensure that our homes are habitable and affordable for the long term. It's not just about comfort. It's not just about a nice thing to do. It's really about life safety. And it's also about racial equity, because we know that those extreme heat days are not born equally. Lower income residents and people of color are more likely to live in the hottest neighborhoods. A study last year by the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, showed that in 97% of the cities that they studied, people of color were exposed to temperatures 2 degrees hotter than white residents. And even when income was held equal, they found that people of color were exposed to higher temperatures than white residents in more than half the counties that they studied. And low income and underserved communities pay a greater percentage of their income for energy. According to ACEEE, the median energy burden of a Black household in DC is 70% higher than that of non-Hispanic white households. So the need to accelerate action is here today. And as a sector, we have decades of experience to build upon to make our homes more efficient and to harness the sun to move away from fossil fuels. And I'm so pleased to be able to turn it over to my colleagues here to lift up some of their innovative examples about how they're doing just that.
Thank you very much, Krista. I have to say, I'm glad you mentioned NHT. As a side note, it was thanks to Enterprise in their syndication arm that we brought in a tax credit investor to our first big development. And our first foray as a solar developer. They took a chance on us and we were just thrilled. In addition, we got our loan from NHT CDF, NHT Community Development Fund, thanks again to the partnership with Enterprise. And we couldn't be happier to have them as partners in solar in the district. So you've gone way beyond words. Enterprise and NHT both have really helped developers that want to go further. And I'm thrilled that you continued in that since we started. Tell me, are you personally working in the resiliency space, Krista, or are you or have you turned that over?
Yes, I am. And we've done some interesting work here in the district about developing different resilience audit and assessment tools, for instance, that affordable housers can use on their existing stock to see what different upgrades might be feasible and financeable for properties to withstand the climate hazards that we're experiencing here, and at the same time look at how solar installations could be paired with that. So we're
Good.
really trying to take a holistic approach, reduce the impacts of climate change and prepare for the impacts of climate change.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, do both at the same time while you're constructing it. Thank you. We've had a number of questions about that from affordable housing developers, and it's good to know that an Enterprise can help in that area. So thank you. Can they? Is there a particular person at Enterprise they should contact for resiliency, particularly?
Yeah, Lori Schumann is our in-house expert on
Lori
that.
Schumann. Okay.
And I can follow up and make sure that Hand has the right contact information.
But that'd be
to
great.
Share with anyone.
That'd be great. It is such an important topic in the district with power outages and climate change. So thank you. Now to turn to the district particularly, as well as places in other places. Darian, I was interested to know, I didn't realize this until I went back and looked up, that you helped Harvard University develop their largest solar thermal array.
Yeah, that was a little while ago. That was almost 20 years ago now. But yeah, that was quite a project back when solar hot water was very new, back when solar PV was very new.
Yeah.
Learned a lot there, and I've been at WIN some 12 years now. And I could just jump in. Krista, I think you gave a great overview and sort of set the stage, big picture, affordable housing, moving more towards, energy efficiency, embracing sustainability, including solar. I'd like to continue to set that stage by covering some solar basics. And I was asked to give an owner's perspective. WIN has WIN Companies is unique, I think, because we're one of the largest developers and property managers in the country for affordable housing. We have some 120,000 apartments that we manage for nonprofits and for-profits. And we have an in-house sustainability team that I lead that's been at this for almost 15 years now. And so we definitely have some projects under our belt, some real experience. We have about 3 megawatts of solar PV that we've developed on our rooftops. And then in addition to that, about 10 megawatts of off-site solar that we're buying energy bill credits or net metering credits from. and we'll learn more about community solar and how that works as today goes on. One of my favorite projects, though, is in the district, and partnering with DOEE and the Solar for All program. We built 650 kilowatts a few years ago and are giving away 100% of the benefit to low-income residents, subscribing over 150 residents that are saving $500 a year off their electric bill. So to start, though, I want to emphasize that we really do need to emphasize efficiency first before you put solar on a roof. Every single property should have LED lighting. Every single property, should have done an energy audit and really already focused on things like programmable thermostats, insulation, a number of just basic efficiency measures that we need to do before you consider solar. And then beyond that, though, not every property is going to be a good candidate for on-site roof-mounted solar. We estimate 20%, and it might go up a little bit as we reconfigure our new developments to allow for solar, but only about 20, maybe 30% of our properties are good candidates for solar, and that is because of the orientation of the building, competing, needs for limited roof space, whether it's HVAC equipment or a rooftop amenity. There's site shading, just the way the building might have been designed, or perhaps a neighboring building or a neighboring tree that you don't want to cut down or shouldn't cut down. There's also roof age. It's really important you don't put new solar on an old roof. That was something folks did 10, 15 years ago, and they wish they didn't, because the roof needs to be replaced before the end of the solar's useful life. And then there's utility restrictions as well. So solar is, when we build solar, they're many little power plants located on the roof, and they have to interconnect to the electric grid. And in order to do that, you need approval from the electric company, the distribution company, Pepco in DC and Maryland. And there are certain limitations on what the electric grid can and will allow for interconnecting distributed energy like solar. And then the last one is structural. Sometimes we find that the actual physical building really can't maintain the weight of the solar. But in general, there are some ways around that, and we'll get into that a little bit now. And community solar, I think, is a great example. Before diving in, though, I do want to emphasize there are different ways you can own solar. And when we've done it any way we can figure out how, sometimes the partnership, the actual affordable housing property, owns the solar. And that's typically done when we have it in the renovation or the new construction budget, or there's a contingency left over from construction. We'll fold in solar so the partnership actually owns the solar. But if we're coming in after the project's already built and operating, it's a lot easier to think of a third party owning the solar to monetize the tax credits and really sort of just streamline the solar project independent of everything else that goes into owning and operating a normal community. And so there's a little diagram here, and it's not it's meant to be simple, but solar as a technology relies on the sun hitting a solar panel, converting that into electricity. It's DC, direct current electricity, that goes then through an inverter to convert it to alternating current that can be used in a building or exported straight to the grid. And there's one technical component or technical thing that I want to get across in a sort of introduction to solar that I think will help folks really understand. And it's whether or not the solar is connected on the building side of the building's electric meter, or if solar is connected to the grid on the grid side of a building's meter. And I think of that as behind the meter or in front of the meter. And when you're behind the meter, the solar production reduces the amount of electricity that you pull from the grid. And so your bill goes down from your utility company because you're using fewer electrons. If it's ahead of the meter and the solar is connected directly to the grid, it can still benefit the property, but it's not benefiting it by delivering electrons directly to the property, not necessarily. It's benefiting the building through a financial transaction where the property gets bill credits to offset how much it would pay the utility company. And that distinction, I think, is really important. Because contractually, let's say you have a third party, build solar on a affordable housing roof space, the property is either going to be buying electricity when it's behind the meter, or it's going to be buying electric bill credits, net metering credits, or subscriptions to community solar. And in that case, it would be ahead of the meter. And the next slide just summarizes, I think the real difference is contractual. And this is an evolution over the past 10, 15 years as solar has matured. We're, as a building owner, we're either buying power, electrons, or we're buying some form of net metering credit or bill credit or a subscription. And that definitely changes whether or not the solar is connected behind the existing building meter, or if the solar is a standalone facility that connects directly to the grid. Because you can imagine if you have a rooftop solar array that connects directly to the grid and you're buying bill credits, what's to stop that solar project from being located down the street, in a different neighborhood, or maybe on a vacant lot a couple miles away, or in our case in Massachusetts, 100 miles away? As long as it's in the same load zone, we're able to buy electricity credits from an offsite solar farm, benefiting our electric bill, basically buying those credits at a discounted rate, and we don't have to put solar on the roof. So it's an interesting distinction. And the next slide just quickly covers how community solar works. A few examples. The diagram on the left. If you have solar on the roof and it is a community solar project, you might allocate different percentage of the solar output to different units within the building, and some of it might even go to the common area load. And again, I think the takeaway here is when it's community solar connected directly to the grid, it doesn't have to be on the building's roof. It could be located anywhere. And that diagram down there in the middle shows, a community solar project sends the power to the grid, and then the financial benefits can go directly to residents in the case of DC with the great policies that are in place. So I'll stop there and hand it over to Pranay or back to you, Herb, and you can get into more of the financials.
Yeah, thank you, Darian. I'm so struck by that last diagram. It sort of looks like, to paraphrase an affordable housing tenant in California, when she realized she was getting the benefit of community solar. In the one instance of net metering, it's like, as you said, you've got a little power plant on your roof. And we all know the power plants sort of only go in one direction to one sort of user, one load, if you will. Whereas in community solar, it's more like you've got an ATM on the roof and it's just spitting out dollar bills. And those dollar bills can be spread around to the residents or the common areas or residents across the street, as you said. So I love the idea that you've got those two choices, and each one can really benefit the residents in different ways. Thank you. Let me introduce to everybody Pranay Kohli. If you don't know him, you really should get to know him. He is the CEO of Amadeus, an engineering consulting firm in the District of Columbia and Maryland. I had a real sort of epiphany the other day when somebody asked me what the hardest university was to get into. And he was saying, well, is it Harvard? Is it Stanford? And I said, well, Harvard takes about 5% of their applicants, so 1 in 20. I said, but I know a guy who went to a university that takes 1 in 200 applicants. and that's the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi. And the guy I knew, of course, was Pranay. And I thought it was interesting that as somewhat ignorant Americans, we typically don't even realize how competitive internationally this whole thing is. But of course, Pranay also went to school in Munich and in Stockholm. So we truly get your expertise internationally as well, Pranay. So, but tell us, if you will, to sort of add on to what Darian said, how people can use solar.
Thank you, Herb. Thank you for the kind words. Yes, so it has been very good experience working with new partners and working on very innovative, groundbreaking projects in DC. And here is some experience I would like to share with everybody. And as Darian mentioned, how to start developing the project, a solar project, and it starts with the site selection, maybe for the trees, maybe for the building, maybe for the roof, so many different considerations. So that is the part for the site. But in parallel, you may want to start with the initial design, how to find how much solar capacity is at that roof, what kind of panels can be used, what kind of equipment can we use, what's the state of art for the equipment as of today, because the technology is changing very, very quickly in this new industry. So every 6 months, the solar panels actually have gone into a next generation. So sometimes the design that you create 6 months back or even 1 year back, and it can take that much time to develop the whole solar project. So one should be already in some kind of initial design phase, having some idea of the equipment we want to use, from where to source it, and of course, roughly where it will go in terms of layout. Now, once we start with that design phase, it is very important for the solar developer to be in touch with the site owner or the site host, because they might have some plans for long-term renovation of the building, or maybe the roof needs to be replaced in 5 years, but now it might have to be brought back and replaced now in conjunction with solar. Or they may have some other expansion projects for the building. So we really need to take that into account at that earlier stage, because that impacts the design, the capacity, and of course the financing and rebates and tax and everything. If we do not take that into account, then there are complications as we go along the project. Now, because this involves several different stakeholders in practical terms, there's the site developer, it's the financier, the project developer themselves, the site owners, and the installers of the project. And that can be electrician, that can be simple physical work to get the stuff up to the roof. So many people need to be involved. A robust communication mechanism should be in place from very early on in the project. That helps. And if you are newly into the solar business, what you will realize very soon that there will be at least 1 million iterations of the design. Please don't get frustrated. It's part of the solar business. And I know Herb is laughing, but this happens in every project. No project is simple. Okay, if the project is simple, but there's so many steps to be covered before the project actually gets implemented. Now, I have another note that I wanted to discuss about, and that is about a significant part of the project actually involves with utility interconnection. So in DC, for example, the utility locally here is Pepco. And because all solar projects are connected to the utility, unless they're standalone and just have a battery to feed to, we see all projects connected to the grid. And because the grid in places like DC, New York is almost more than 100 years old by now. So, and it was not built for two-way communications or flow of energy. So here we are trying to install something that will fundamentally work with the very basic energy flow in the grid. So PEPCO, of course, has its own sets of rules according to which we have to interconnect the solar system with their grid. And sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not possible to allow that much energy to be connected on a particular transformer. And this is a study, this is a process. So start working with the local utility, whether it's PEPCO in DC or BGE in Maryland or other utilities around the country. Try to get in touch with the utility way in advance. Also goes the same for the permitting authority in DC, for example, DCRA. So sooner we get in touch with them and start discussing our project with them, the sooner we can figure out if there are any issues that need to be resolved or that are unresolvable. Sometimes that happens as well. And when all these things are taken into account, the chances of project moving at a brisk pace is much higher. Okay. Now, all of these things are very practical things. One more thing which is very, very important is the skills and the experience of the company that is actually going to install. In solar industry, we call them the EPC, engineering, procurement, and construction companies. And there are several of them in DC, very good companies. And it's very important that they have an experience of the territory. So DC, Maryland, Virginia, wherever we are working, typically have some specific rules for that territory. It's very important that your installer knows how to navigate that framework of all the rules, all the requirements, because otherwise some companies who do not have that experience, they get stuck at various processes, and that brings risk to the project. You really want to reduce the risk, so you should know and work with an experienced person. Many times what we have also realized is solar is new for example, low-income housing or many other industries. So internal skills are typically not available in the industry or the company. So it may actually help to bring in outside help to manage the solar project. Like some people bring in construction managers. So that may help smooth out, because that can provide the additional skills needed to navigate through the whole thing. So these were some of the practical aspects of the doing solar projects in DC, and they're, I think, equally applicable across the country in the US and anywhere else as well. So I think at that point, I would give it back to Herb. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Pranay. And Gary, before we've got a question that came in for Darian that's still, well, I think it's sort of fresh on people's mind on the financing, particularly with the way, Darian, you described solar as either being owned on-site or off-site, or even owned, in this case, owned by the apartment manager, or it could be owned by a third-party solar developer, as you said. So in either case, how do you, Chris Marshall asks, when you put solar into your whole project budget, how do you model that over your 15-year pro forma? Do you count SREC revenue? And I guess you really should back up and tell us who gets the SREC revenue. We hear a lot about that, but the way you described the two different options would be a great way to start with this. For an affordable housing complex owner that may or may not want to be the developer itself?
Yeah, so good question. And whoever owns the solar gets the subsidy, and SRECs are a form of subsidy. They stand for Solar Renewable Energy Certificate, and one SREC equals 1,000 kilowatt hours of solar production that you then sell to utility companies who are mandated to comply with alternative energy requirements for the whole portfolio. So yeah, if we assume the building owner owns the solar, it really depends on how you're paying for that, and if it's built in upfront as a cost that you're planning to recover, with real energy savings. As I said, a lot of times we're able to get solar paid for because we had leftover contingency from a construction budget. But if we're planning it right from the start, it does make sense to budget something for both the incentives and for the energy savings that you are going to generate. And as I said before, solar is like a mini little power plant, and the production from the solar power plant can be modeled with relative accuracy. And you can forecast out what the benefit is going to be at the property level, you know, reducing the amount of electricity you need to buy from the grid. And you can value that on the current rate, your current electric rate. And you can also take a educated guess at what the SREC values, the incentive values are going to be. Those are not fixed, they change over time. It's a competitive marketplace. And we've seen historically some pretty big fluctuations there. So I'd say it's just like any other underwriting, especially utility budget underwriting. You want to make your best case, best guess. You don't want to be too aggressive, or you might get stuck later, not meeting what you underwrote. But I think it's reasonable to underwrite something. The other part of your question, you're asking, do you underwrite reduced tenant utility allowances coming from solar-related savings? And we have proactively not done that. So we've focused on properties that are not HUD properties, where we would automatically have to recalculate a utility allowance if the residents get the benefit, because we want residents to get the benefit and keep the benefit. We don't want to adjust the utility allowance in a negative way for residents. And this is getting in the weeds a little bit, but it's an interesting, I guess, conundrum and a policy discussion that the folks at HUD know about and other folks know about it, but there's no clear solution other than to just focus on LIHTC properties, where you can give the residents a savings on their electric bill and then choose not to adjust the utility allowance.
Yes,
a little complex there, but
yeah, it is, and this is one of those actually current topics to sort of watch this space in the future, because people who have been interested in this, in the affordable housing field, have felt that asking HUD in the prior 4-year period we've had would not necessarily give them the most policy oriented answer that would benefit the residents. But there are initiatives going on right now to engage HUD to answer that question in a, if you will, a kinder, fairer way, so that the residents can get the benefit of the solar if they're either given it through community net metering, community solar or net metering, and not reduce the utility allowance that they're paying, so that they get the cash benefit without having to then have their rent raised. And that was the old conundrum. Well, if you save somebody money on solar but then raise their rent, they're no better off. So that immediately turned a lot of people off from doing it. But that's changing. And in addition, that only applies to a certain very small subset of properties where the residents are getting direct HUD assistance as well. Not so your suggestion of using LIHTC properties is a real good one. Have you done solar on LIHTC properties and included it in your LIHTC budget as well?
You mean including the cost of the solar in the basis for the LIHTC?
Yeah.
We have done that, yeah. And you can double dip. The basis does count for LIHTC and it does count for the solar investment tax credits. You have to get your tax credit investor on board, and to monetize it, because those credits will flow to the investor. And a lot of them are, but the solar, on a given roof, you might fit 100, maybe 200 kilowatts of solar. So it's, we're talking $300,000, $400,000 worth of equipment, which in terms of the big project isn't that much. And sometimes these tax credit investors don't pay a lot of attention to solar because it's just given the scale, not that significant. And
sometimes you can get a better return by having the developer own the solar and then give you the cash return and let the developer worry about the SRECs. So with that as background, Gary Skolnick has been a friend and colleague of ours for many years. He's the CEO and founder of Neighborhood Sun. But I was most impressed, Gary, that way back in 2004 and 2006, and probably even before that, you were the lead advocate for Maryland to go to change the renewable portfolio standard and the Maryland Healthy Air Act. I'm both impressed and thankful and grateful you did that as a resident of Maryland. So anyway, how would you say this all fits into the Maryland scheme now?
Sure. The 2004 was the Maryland RPS, but also the DC RPS that got everything started, including these $400 SRECs.
Yeah.
Is great. So yeah, Gary Skolnick, I'm the CEO of Neighborhood Sun. We are a benefit corporation that has a mission to bring solar to everybody, not just a select few. And we do that by specializing in helping low and moderate income residents in Maryland, New Jersey, and the district to switch to community solar. We've done several hundred customers already in Camden and Baltimore and elsewhere. So the Maryland program got started in 2015 when we passed the legislation to enable community solar. Solar is like a lot of other industries where it's very dependent on legislation and regulations to make it happen. And it happens on a state by state level. So each state has to do its own thing. So Maryland passed its law in 2015. It took them 3 years to promulgate the rules. And in 2018, it started out as a 3-year pilot program, but they since extended it to 7 years. And it allows for about 80 megawatts per year of community solar, which, you know, is a decent amount. It's not too much. We certainly would like more. The way they set it up is they put the allocation into 3 buckets. So one is just open category for any kind of project up to 2 megawatts AC. But the other 2 buckets are meant to encourage the kinds of solar that we're talking about today. One is LMI, so it's a bucket that includes projects that sell at least 30% of their output to low and moderate income residents. And the other is small brownfield and other, which has a few things if you're on a brownfield, but it also encourages rooftop solar is included in that. So this was Maryland's way to say, we don't just want every community solar project to be built on a farm and serving people with high credit scores. We want it to be a little more equitable. And it's worked for the most part. Another key piece of Maryland's legislation, which DC also has, is that the solar credits are credited at the full retail rate. So that means that if you're in Pepco, Maryland, your average rate, if you include generation, transmission, distribution, Montgomery County or Prince George's County energy tax, is about 13.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's really good for the solar developers or for anybody who's interested in owning a community solar project. It gives you a better financial picture. DC is similar to that, but DC does have a lower rate for non-residential properties. But of course, that's made up for with the $400 SRECs, whereas in Maryland, the SREC is more of like $50 to $70 range. The Maryland Energy Administration has established an incentive for LMI projects to increase the discount offered. And the projects we've been working on in Western Maryland and Baltimore area have all taken advantage of this. So it's not quite DC where you're able to give people free electricity, but it's 25 or 30% discount, which is still significant. For people at the market rate, they typically are getting 5 to 10%.
Right.
So that is a big difference. Multifamily properties are allowed to petition to be part of the program. So in this case, you have to distinguish between a multifamily property that is master metered and one that has individual meters. So if you're talking about individual meters, then there's no need to petition to get into the program because each individual resident can sign up on their own. But if you're a property where you have 1 meter for all your residents, you can still get in the program. And we've actually done this twice so far. We worked with the Washington County Housing Authority. For them, it was fairly easy. They applied to the Maryland Public Service Commission, and we helped them out. All they had to do was they showed that all of their residents are low income, and they had to state that they're going to pass on the savings directly to the residents. So that one was fairly straightforward. Another one we got in was a little more difficult. It was the Augsburg Lutheran Homes. They have a mix of low, moderate, and non-low income people, and they are not a housing authority, so they can't show that everybody meets the income qualifications. So it took a little back and forth with the PSC, but we showed that we had to show the income levels of the various residents, because they do take their income levels, but they don't turn anybody away. So we showed the income levels, and we showed that 80% of the people who lived there were low or moderate income. And then they had to show a plan for how they were going to credit everybody, but not the people who were not low income, but everyone who's low income, credit them with their monthly community charge as the way to pass on the solar savings. So they got a 25% discount. They're going to take that monetary value of that 25% discount to their meter, because it's a single meter, and divvy it up to the residents on a pro rata basis, based on how large the apartment is for each resident. So that passed. The PSC approved that. So there are a couple ways you can get in. It is now a fairly straightforward process, and Maryland has done quite a bit. Virginia, just south of the border, is also getting its community solar, a bit late in the game, but they're joining. They passed legislation that allows 150 megawatts to start out. 30% of all projects have to be LMI. That's the goal. If they hit that goal, then they could add another 50 megawatts to the capacity. It's going to roll out in 2023 for consumers. That's when they could start signing up. But if you are interested in getting a project into the program, that is expected to open up starting in July of this year. So, as previous speakers were talking about, the solar development process can take months, if not years sometimes. So the developers can get an early start this year, and then the program will open up for the consumers in 2023. Virginia does have also a multifamily shared program. It's not clear how that interacts with the overall community solar program, but it does allow multifamily properties to participate. They put a 3 megawatt cap for a project, or 5 megawatts if you're doing co-location, meaning a contiguous location with the same owner. Likewise to what I talked about with Maryland, that you have to prove that the tenants are in fact getting the benefits. And this could be additional capacity above what the program sets out. In wrapping up, there's just a couple of other programs I wanted to take note of. One is New Jersey, which has a fantastic community solar program in that they created a scoring system. So they didn't go with like the 3 buckets like Maryland did. It's a scoring system, and basically the only way you're going to get into the program is if your project is at least 51% LMI, and even better if it's a rooftop project or a brownfield. So it really encourages the solar developers to hone in on multifamily properties and trying to get rooftops. Unfortunately, in New Jersey, though, as far as multifamily properties being customers, it doesn't work out financially because of the way the credits are valued. A multifamily property with a single meter is going to pay a lot less than a residential customer. So one of the things that we're advocating for is an LMI adder, to say if if a community solar project is serving a master metered low income property, that there should be an adder on the revenue that would come from the solar project. That seems to be one way to get around that. They haven't adopted that yet. Another thing that Maryland has looked at and New York, I think, has already done is personal property tax abatements or credits for properties that put up community solar on their roof. So there's a lot going on in it. There's community solar in at least 16 states across the country, more if you count some of the other programs, and it's a really great time for anybody to be getting into the industry.
That's terrific. Thank you, Gary. I was curious. I know one of the interesting things about the district is to use Darian's two options of behind the meter or in front of the meter. The regular net metering always works with the rate, the energy rate that the building was paying. So in the district, it's usually been around 8 cents a kilowatt hour that the commercial, any commercial building is paying, even an apartment complex. Whereas there's special legislation in the district which says if you go community solar and you give the cash value to residents, you get to give it to them at 13 cents an hour, which is way cool because it's like you're making money on this. Just because you're using community solar because the residents are getting a higher value per electron. Is that true in other states too?
No, that's kind of what I'm talking about with the adder. That's exactly the model that we want to look at for other states, because otherwise the financials just don't work out.
Right. Also, it seems in a very maybe from where I sit, much fairer to the residents. If you're going to give them a credit at the same rate they're paying for electricity. They're paying 13 cents a kilowatt hour. You give them a credit for usage. It should be at that rate. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree. And there's certainly, the opposition to solar is trying to make a counterattack and basically lowering the amount that people would get credited for either net metering or virtual net metering in solar. So it's a constant struggle. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think we're just at the point when we'd like to start the second panel, but if any of our panelists have any sort of concluding remarks they want to make or thoughts they had based on what other people were saying, please sort of unmute yourself and if you can, and let me know. No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. It's been a great panel. I think if I can sort of speak for the audience, it is that there's almost too much to absorb of all these financing solutions and options. But you really are seeing that it can be done, it has been done, and that it can be done more places than just in the district. But as sort of in the words of Pranay, find somebody to help you who's done it before, who has some experience with this, the panelists we've got, or they can suggest others if you're interested. And so obviously so can we. Thank you very, very much, Pranay and Darian and Kristen and Gary. And let me turn it over now to Sasha Srivastava, who we are privileged to have as our executive director at New Partners Community Solar.
Thank you, Herb. As Herb said, I'm Sasha Srivastava, and I'm the executive director at New Partners Community Solar. And for this next session, we're going to be talking about bringing renewable energy to underserved communities. So we have a couple of presenters who are going to talk in more detail about channeling solar energy to clean and renewable communities. And it's a critical step in this whole process because after you build and finance these solar arrays, you need to make sure that they're distributed to the people who need the benefit most. So I would encourage anyone who has questions on this section to put them in the chat, and I'll make sure that our speakers are able to address your questions. And for our first speaker, we have Lenwood Coleman from Groundswell. He's the Chief Program Officer. And Lenwood, if you would like to go ahead and start your presentation with your slides.
I'm going to start by saying I'm pleasured and honored to be here. And just a little bit about Groundswell. We're a 501c3. Our headquarters are in Washington, D.C. And with that, our focus is that clean energy belongs to all. It's a right, a God-given right, that we all have that pleasure. And with that, we have a focus toward working with our low moderate income communities to ensure that they have the ability to have the advantages of the economics, the education, and the opportunities for employment in this fast-growing program that we see in clean energy. Next slide. As you know, clean energy is in abundance now as we are looking at how well solar works within urban settings as well as within the cities that we work in. Next slide, please. Many times working with churches opens up a lot of opportunities for us. As you can see, the partnerships with the city, OPC, which is Office of People's Councils, we're able to bring different types of opportunities to our church and the community. In the background, you will see that we have St. Luke Church. And with it, we not only put in solar, but we put in an HVAC system, which improved their ability to lower their bills. And they were able to serve the congregation with the solar energy that we provided, as well as to the community. So sometimes when you think outside the box, it's not just that one parcel that gets a benefit from clean energy. What I was brought here today to do was to talk about how the subscriber program works. And with that, DOEE provided us with an opportunity last year when they put out an RFP that allowed us to provide services to our low moderate income communities in the Washington, D.C. area. We call it the Solar for All FY20. And how does it work? It's quite simple, really. DOEE made it quite easy for us to serve the community in the capacity of putting them in the PEPCO Community Solar Portal. And how is that done? DOEE pre-approves the subscribers, and they do that through using discount programs and other marketing tools to bring these low moderate income communities to the table. Now, they have to qualify after they've been pre-approved, of course, and they use agencies like SNAP, TANF, and the utility discount programs to make that an easy process to get the community in. Once they have packaged the community programs and the residents into this program, they send them to Groundswell. And our customer support team goes through a process of uploading the subscribers into the PEPCO Community Solar Portal. That's unique. Why? In order for them to get their credits, they have to be in the PEPCO system. And by doing that, a couple of things are required. A PEPCO service number, which identifies the meter that will get that energy. The account number, which is the paying customer itself. This opens the door for us to act almost similar to a utility, because the customer support team has the responsibility of now marketing and educating the consumer or that low moderate income subscriber. That calls for problem solving. Many subscribers don't quite know how that program works. So we have our customer service team actually taking phone calls, calling them one by one, bringing them up to speed as to how the program works, and taking away some of the stress of where are my credits. We address that for them. We then provide, and then, as I would say, look at what that experience looks like for the customer. You can't get better at something unless you actually interact with the customer. So with that, we look very carefully at the experience that they have in being in this program. The customer service is provided from 9:30 to 5:30 Monday through Friday. If there anything else you'd like to know, I'm available to provide more information.
Sure, thanks for that, Linda. And also, so for a subscriber, say today I decided that I wanted to access solar, and I would be qualified within the system if I go through the paperwork. How long could I expect it to take between today when I decide that I want to do this and for the credit to actually appear on my bill?
I would say within 30 to 45 days after it's been entered into the system, you would be notified through us that you're in, and then many times you would see it on your credit bill. I mean, on your bill, monthly bill, as to how you are getting your credits.
And for the application, the initial application, where would people be able to most easily find that?
They would be able to go right online, and they would have assistance from one of the customer service agents to ensure taking them through the process. Now, some would go through DOEE, some would come through us. And we have a portal that we would allow them to put their information in to qualify them. And then once that information is all put in and approved by DOEE, we then are given the direction to go ahead and put them in the PEPCO portal.
Are there any differences between the end result of going through Groundswell directly or going through DOEE first?
No, because of the relationship we have with them, that information is relayed back and forth between the team. And that once they're in, they actually stay in the program for 3 years before they're renewed again.
Great. And the renewal process, what is that like? Is it just like the application process, or is it less involved than that?
With the program being so new, the new processes to renew have not yet been put in place.
You haven't hit the 3-year mark for anyone yet.
It just started, so that's a
enough.
whole new frontier all its own.
You also mentioned working with churches. How do you usually get a church's interest into connecting to solar?
Well, basically, and that's a good question. We go out into the community with the assistance of the Office of the People's Councils, recognition from other churches that we have done business with in the past, and we lay out a presentation to them. First on the solar, what it means to have clean energy. We talk about USGBC, we talk about DCSDU and the services they can provide. And with that, we provide a package of what are their needs. Many times we don't quite realize that when we go in the community, they don't want to be told what to do. They want you to be a real partner. And with that, we listen to find out what their needs are. And then upon that understanding, we create a plan of action. And with that action, normally the church and the trustee board, you know how that goes, and the business meetings, we come up with an idea of how we will move forward, what it means to them, and then we put that in writing. Many times a handshake is done and folk are very, very apprehensive. It can't be true. It's not going to cost me anything. We put that in black and white. We let them review it. We break down the barriers. And with that, we find it to be quite successful.
Do you ever encounter resistance from skeptical community members who think that getting a free credit on their utility bill is too good to be true?
Absolutely. I don't know anyone that thinks that it will come free until we have proven to them through other, sometimes you'll bring in another church, or you'll bring in some of the community leaders, or you turn around and you actually talk to some of the agencies and have them present for you in those meetings. Each step breaks down a barrier. First, we make sure that the resident or the organization knows exactly what the program's about. Then we assure them that what we put in paper is legal, a document we can be held by. And as you slowly bring in that kind of a process, you get the confidence and the trust that you're looking for.
Great. Well, thank you for all of that very helpful information, Lenwood. And again, I encourage anyone in the audience, if they have questions for him, to go ahead and put it in the chat. But for our next speaker, I'd like to introduce Jared Lang. Jared is the Senior Project Manager at Wesley Housing, and he has a presentation that he's going to give to us about other ways of channeling energy to communities.
Hello, all. As Sasha stated, I'm Jared Lang. I'm with Wesley Housing, and I was with National Housing Trust before this for about 8 years. I recently joined Wesley about 5 months ago, and I've been asked to talk a little bit about the role that a developer can play in actually trying to get this community solar benefits to residents. When I started financing solar for nonprofits and private developers 10 years ago, I would always get the question, great, it helps the common meter, but how do we get the benefits to the residents? So I think, lately we've started to figure it out, and working with a lot of people on these panels, my friends and colleagues on these panels, we've done a lot of projects together to get benefits to low-income people. So if you want to go to the next slide. So this is just a little bit about Wesley for those. I know the hand members know, many of the hand members know some of the very dynamic ladies that run this organization, Shelley Murphy and Camilla McAfee. But for those that don't, we're a nonprofit. We like to call ourselves a service-rich affordable housing provider because we really focus on resident services. We have about 35 communities, and I'm the DC project manager. We have a couple projects in DC, mostly in Virginia, and we serve mostly minorities. So when we're talking about bringing the benefits of solar to low-income people and social equity, that's who we're serving in our communities. Next slide. So I like the bricks and sticks. I really enjoy that part about it. So I want to share some real actual projects that I'm working on and the solar components of it. So this is the Hampshire Apartments at 5,000 New Hampshire. Many of the examples I have are DC examples, but I also have some things from Maryland, and Virginia is very new. So I think eventually we'll have some examples from Virginia. This is a 2 buildings, a 56 unit tax credit property. We're doing 9% LIHTC and historic credits. And this is kind of what Darian described, sort of net metering and more of the traditional way of financing. We're going to finance this solar through the property, and the way that we're getting the benefits to the residents is sort of that old way where it doesn't necessarily take community solar, but we're going to generate about $43,000 a year in savings and incentives, and we're going to dedicate $20,000 toward resident services. This is what we used to do before community solar, and I think it's a really kind of an interesting example. I think you could see, after the tax benefits, the solar system costs like $100 grand. The paybacks are very strong for us, and we, especially in DC, we feel like we are more than open to being able to share the benefits between the property and the residents. Next slide. So this is our Cedar Street project, 410 Cedar Street Northwest, near the Tacoma Metro. It's a small kind of garden style project. It's kind of a U shape, and it's under construction at the moment. So this is it doesn't look great, but that's the construction picture. So we're just kind of building a small 36 kilowatt system. We brought in an outside investor who is a friend and colleague of Wesley Housing, and they're going to take the solar incentives and they're going to give us, Wesley Housing, the free power. And then we're going to take that and split it up and administer it to the residents, and they're going to get $14 on their utility bills each month for a free power to reduce their bills. Their bills are around like $50, $50 to $60. So, this is like 20% of their bill. And next slide. This is our Brookland Place solar project that we're working on right now. We built this in 2019. It's 80 units. I think you could kind of see it's a few adjoining buildings in Northeast DC, and we're going to do a canopy structure here to put 270 kilowatt system on top of the roof here. We're going to bring in an outside investor to partner with us. And Wesley, when we bring in an outside investor, we look to sort of participate in the projects with either getting lease payments for the use of our roof space, maybe an upfront development fee, and sometimes some savings to the common area utilities. So in this project, it's pretty good size. So, the investor that we're working with is going to be able to give us, $100,000 development fee, $15,000 per year to the property. And then we're going to donate the free power, $23,000 a year. So for the 80 residents, it's like $25 per month per resident. So this one's a little bigger and stronger. Just depends on the space that you have. Next slide. So of course, this is where we started with community solar, and the first community solar project done by New Partners Community Solar. So I wanted to give a nod to my colleagues on the panel here, where when I was at NHT, we worked together. New Partners was the lead developer and sponsor, and we developed solar on 3 rooftops of Brookfield properties. We're donating power to 100 residents in a property owned by the National Housing Trust and Mission First. It's a total of 170 kilowatts, and it ends up being about $20 per month per resident. And it was no upfront investment for NHT and Mission First. New Partners sort of took care of the whole capital stack. New Partners team, would you like to add anything to this?
Yeah. Well, thanks for highlighting our work and that particular project that kind of kicked off everything for both of us. But this is an interesting way to look at solar, because it also highlights that you don't always have to put the solar on the exact roof where the people are receiving the benefit. These are actually in completely different areas of DC. So these are downtown rooftops feeding to Copeland Manor and Trinity Place. And the way that Pepco is doing that crediting system, it enables for that energy to flow, so to speak, all the way through. And so that the residents don't have to live directly underneath their solar systems if their roofs are not going to be able to support that. So thank you for bringing that up, Jared. It's an important point.
Sure, yeah, and I think it's just a very clever concept that there's a lot of roof owners out there that, maybe the solar projects are smaller from an investment perspective for them, but that there might be a sort of a philanthropic or a donation angle to find space around DC. And New Partners was very clever when it came to this. Next slide. I wanted to give a nod to Gary and Neighborhood Sun, because they're doing such unbelievable work. This is just the Simba Solar Farm, and rooftop community solar is pretty challenging in Maryland and Virginia, just because of the cost relative to the cost of power and the return. But there's some really great organizations like Neighborhood Sun that you can hook up with. and you can help your residents subscribe to these projects and get the benefits of renewable energy. Next slide. So that's it for me. Some different ways to get low-income residents involved as an owner.
Great, thank you. And we actually did have a question come in. So Lenwood, feel free to jump in on this after Jared answers. But we had a question if the credits are portable if a resident moves homes or apartments.
Yeah, they are. Because we're a real estate organization, I think we really try to serve the people who live in our communities. So we would probably we keep the credit with the unit, but you don't have to do that. And maybe I would imagine probably Groundswell could take a different approach.
Well, I would have to agree that as long as they stay within the District of Columbia, and they qualify as low moderate income families or individuals, they would still be able to qualify and get that credit.
Great, that's awesome because people move every couple of years, and it's good to know that their credits are going to continue.
Their account number might change. They might have to give some updated information.
That's correct.
Right. My understanding is that they need to make sure that their names are attached to the correct meter, but as long as they still qualify financially for it, they'll continue to receive it. They might just need to let PEPCO know one way or another on where they moved to. All right. Well, thank you both for those presentations, and you can contact either Jared or Lenwood afterwards if you have any follow-up questions that they didn't address today. But now I would like to pass the mic off to Jeff for our next panelist session.
Thank you, Sasha. Another great panel, and I really appreciate the comments and perspective that Lenwood and Jared brought to that. And it really helped show the progression of solar for affordable housing and how it's continued to get more and more abstract, but also more and more effective. Moving from having to have solar on the actual rooftop of an affordable housing complex. Sort of the next stage was we actually worked with the New Markets Tax Credit clients to form solar companies to put their panels on affordable housing project rooftops and do power purchase agreements. And then we've with this generation of community solar, we've been able to sort of disaggregate the location of the panels from the recipients. They certainly can be at affordable housing complexes and serve those residents, but this concept of having buildings of all types. Remember, the Darien said that only about 20% of the affordable housing rooftops are essentially solar ready to have 15 or 20 year solar projects or longer. And so one of the ways around that is to find rooftops or fields anywhere in the district or in the jurisdiction that has community solar and be able to produce solar there through community solar, direct all the benefits, the economic benefits of that solar energy to people anywhere in the district. And for us, that means finding affordable housing residents throughout the district to direct those to. The last panel also demonstrated that there are kind of two ways to do this. If you want to develop and direct the solar directly yourselves, you can form a community renewable energy facility or a CREF, which is what New Partners did. And through that, that's basically an account, as Herb was mentioning. That's this ATM analogy. We have an energy account where all the energy that we produce is registered with PEPCO, and then they're by law required to direct the benefits of those energies, of that energy, to wherever we say. And we say that we're sending them to specific designated accounts in the affordable housing developments that we're working with. So this final panel is one that is, these are all near and dear to my heart. This is one that's particularly special to me. I began my legal career in 1979 in HUD's Office of General Counsel, the headquarters office in Washington, D.C. And I'd studied urban studies in college, and to the extent I could find classes that touched on that space in law school, I did that. But the truth is I never really worked very deeply with the specific federal statutes and regulations that govern affordable housing. And so my first week on the job, I decided it was time to stop faking my way through it. And sooner or later, I had to actually read those statutes and regulations and familiarize myself with them. And one of the things that sticks with me to this day is reading through that legislation and looking at the standards for HUD housing. The standard, for those of you, most of you probably know this in the field, is to provide decent, safe, and sanitary housing. And that's great. And I understand that for a federal agency that's responsible for literally millions of units, you have to have sort of a baseline that works everywhere in the country. But what a low bar, decent, safe, and sanitary housing. And that's fine. And it's great. And it's great to do something rather than nothing. But it struck me then, and now decades later, it strikes me more than ever, that our collective job has got to be to go beyond decent, safe, and sanitary housing. I have the utmost respect for people like Jeffrey Canada and the Harlem Children's Zone, and this concept of doing whatever it takes to not just provide shelter, but education, community services, and all sorts of education to really improve the lives of so many in our country, and to break that cycle of intergenerational poverty. And that's what people on this panel are doing in many ways. And that's what this panel is about. It's going beyond the housing itself, beyond the fact that we're putting solar on rooftops in various places. And the idea really is, how can that solar be a gateway to so much more? How can that solar itself become the mechanism and the channel to do these other things, the whatever it takes, to make vibrant and respectful affordable housing communities? And also, how can solar provide financing, not just sort of self-financing for solar arrays for energy, but how can solar itself be a mechanism for bringing more funding into projects? Those are really important concepts, and for me, sort of, they really do bring together these concepts of addressing climate change through renewable energy, but also really finding ways to change lives and help address income inequality and social justice. And so this last panel will be closing us out in this very, very important way. One of the, let me start by saying we've got just an incredible panel to help us here. We're going to be hearing from Elijah Perry, who is the Executive Director of Grid Alternatives in the Mid-Atlantic region, Jim Knight, who's President and CEO of Jubilee Housing, Don Haig, who works with Montgomery Housing Partnership, and Mark Davis, who's the founder and president of WDC Solar, bringing different perspectives, but all focusing on sort of this general concept. I think we'll start with Elijah. I'm going to be tossing out questions. This is going to be a little bit more of a Q&A and less of primary presentations, but I'd like to start, Elijah, just tell us about Grid Alternatives and the work that you do in the district and broader.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me for this great, awesome discussion. My name is Elijah Perry, pronouns he, him, and his. I am the executive director of Grid Mid-Atlantic. We're a 501c3 organization that focuses on community development through the access to solar energy and solar jobs. We take a holistic approach, and I loved what Krista mentioned during the first panel about that as well, because that's how we implement our work. We not only look at providing access to the solar industry through single family and rooftop solar and community solar projects, but we also try to provide the technical trainings to those very same communities so they can be able to have a robust career in the solar industry. So therefore, we're creating a diverse workforce for the industry as well. We have several initiatives that we implemented at Grid. One is Solar Futures, which focuses on trying to build young leaders in solar through K through 12. And then we also do Women in Solar and Troops to Solar, which focuses on the troops. We know the troops face many barriers when they come back from serving the country, and many of them are left out, with anywhere like income or any type of sustainability on their own. So we try to train them as well for a career in solar. And then Women in Solar, we try to highlight women, the voices of women in the solar industry, and try to create diversity amongst that as well too. Our flagship program that we implement here at Greater Mid-Atlantic is something that's dear to my heart, and that's SolarWorks DC. That's a program that we implement in partnership with DOEE, the Department of Employment Services, as well as the DC Infrastructure Academy. In that program, we implement 2 cohorts of 12 weeks. That's the fall, spring. We're currently in our spring cohort right now. And we also do like an abridged 6-week cohort, which is a part of the Marion Barry Summer Youth Employment Program. The age ranges from 18 to as long as you want to get up on a ladder for the 12-week programs. And then for the 6-week program is 18 to 24. What's dear to me about this program is that we not only focus on the technical aspects of the program. What we've learned is that folks can understand the technical aspects to install solar. What they haven't had was the case management soft skills because of the lack of resources to the communities I'm one of the residents from that community as well. To have a successful career. One of the things that we do as part of our case management, which I love the fact that Linwood talked about, was that we have conversations with the trainees. We do check-ins with them, making sure they have housing, making sure they have access to food. One of the things that we've learned through COVID and implementing this program is that there are also technical barriers as well. We automatically think because it's 2021, everyone has cell phone, so therefore everyone must have access to a laptop and internet, and that is not the case. So through our partners at DOEE and DOES, we provide them with laptops and also iPads and other devices so they'll be able to participate in the program and complete the program in its entirety, and that won't be a barrier for them.
That's awesome, Elijah. We'll hear more about this. Is green jobs. We're hearing a lot, particularly in this administration, about the need for green jobs, the funding that's going to be going into green jobs, and the importance of employment. That's all part of this intergenerational way to address intergenerational poverty and get people good paying technical jobs. We're going to be hearing more also from Mark Davis in a few minutes about that as well. But for right now, I'd like to turn to Jim Knight. And let's talk about, you're representative of an organization that has a lot of affordable housing in the Adams-Morgan area of Washington, D.C. And you characterize what you want to accomplish. Let's hold up on the slide a little bit. I think we're not ready for that one yet, if you don't mind, Courtney. So Jim, you characterize the housing that you are trying to build and are building and operating at Jubilee as justice housing. Can you tell us what do you mean by justice housing? What is it, and what do you want to accomplish as an owner and operator of affordable housing?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And first, just let me say how grateful I am to be part of this important discussion today. Really, really good to be here. Justice housing is a phrase that has evolved for us in very recent years. Simply put, it talks about housing that is deeply affordable, is located in resource-rich neighborhoods, comes with on-site and nearby programs and services. We decided to turn to that phrase in recent years as the affordable housing crisis has really intensified in DC and throughout the regions. And what we've seen is that the income level to which affordable housing has climbed is practically all the way up to 100% AMI. It's important to have housing that's affordable at all of the price points along the way. But our work since our beginnings in the early 70s has really centered on those with the fewest financial resources. So the first pillar, deeply affordable, and to those with facing the greatest barriers, 2/3 of our portfolio, more than 200 units, are affordable at 30% AMI and below. In addition to that, we have ways to reach out and support particular communities that face the greatest obstacles, people who are overcoming homelessness, people who are returning from a period of incarceration. Really important to try to find solutions for people who have the hardest time finding their way into high quality housing. That second pillar, I think, is rather obvious to us all. Each one of us needs resources and opportunities in order to become our best selves. So whether we're talking about public transportation, good grocery stores, high-performing schools, access to retail, anything that you can imagine that any one of us needs to be successful, we all need that to be successful. And too often, affordable housing finds itself in neighborhoods and locations where there's just too much distance to get to those resources. The last thing we say is, with on-site and nearby programming, Jubilee's model from the earliest days has included developing mixed-use properties that have housing, but also have other amenities that support residents. We especially like to put early childhood education centers, after-school programs, things that support kids in their educational journeys. Also like to co-locate with health care centers. And really that co-location does a couple of things. It reduces the barrier from transportation. You don't need transportation to walk downstairs. And it reduces costs too, because it's a lot more cost effective to operate in that way. So I'd say two more things. It's called justice because it delivers just access to the people who are too often cut off from that access. And really by doing that is counteracting a legacy of segregation and discrimination. And it's called justice housing because it sort of proves to all of us what we already know can be true, and that is that we can have neighborhoods that are diverse, that foster inclusion, that really are a launch pad for anybody and everybody to succeed. And so, yeah, I'll give it back to you there, Jeff.
Well, let me have a follow-up for you, Jim. Ever since I met you and heard about environmental justice as a focus, it wasn't lost on me that your mission is environmental justice, is justice housing, and New Partners' mission is environmental justice. And for those of us who think in Venn diagrams, there's these circles that just meet, and in the middle is this gigantic overlap of the concept of justice. So how does what you describe, how is it enhanced by or informed by sustainability and the environmental piece? And how does that play a role? Is that a critical part in what you consider justice housing?
Yeah, sure. And we actually laugh that since we met new partners, we want to say that our work is the intersection between housing and environmental justice. That certainly was not at the tip of our tongues before we got into this work. And as some other panelists have pointed out earlier on, sort of the cost benefits of bringing solar to multifamily apartment buildings weren't straightforward and easy early on. And so while we were pretty well on top of the green movement and following most of the built practices, we were a little skittish around solar, and did eventually put a first set of panels on a small building in I think it was 2016, but there was so little roof area that there really didn't produce a lot of electricity. So we were not sure that would be part of the way that we pursued justice, frankly, and until we met you guys. And Jeff and Herb sort of asked us to take a second look, and we were willing to do so. And when you explained to us that there was now a mechanism, thanks to DOE and others, Pepco in our area, to deliver the benefits to the residents of the properties, we became very interested. So with your help at our most recent development, the Maycroft now has an array of its own on the rooftop, but the residents at the Maycroft and others in our Jubilee portfolio, 100 plus, are able to receive the benefits of community solar, that $50 savings each month across more of our properties. So we're a believer now, and each time we look at a new opportunity, we try to determine best for us to put the solar on, best to call Jeff and Herb again, or what exactly is going to deliver the best outcome for residents. And a last thing there that really was the cherry on the top for us at Maycroft was we were most of the way through the project. Construction was well underway, and Jeff and the team, Pranay, said, well, you've got community solar working now. We've got another idea for you to consider. And we're like, okay, what's next? This idea of providing a resiliency center, a battery backup system in case the grid goes down. So we volunteered to be the guinea pig, and the Maycroft property now has the first in DC resiliency center. And I think you have an image or two of that. You can call for it when you're ready, Jeff. I just point out, back to sort of environmental justice, is where do you find the first resiliency center in the district? Is it in the latest high-end condo building? No, it's located in an affordable housing community where residents often aren't able to get sort of best of technologies.
Great, thank you. And you got, for the audience, you can now see this is the Maycroft Apartments in Adams Morgan. It's a 64-unit, deeply affordable housing project developed by Jubilee. And it's a beautiful historic rehab in a rapidly gentrifying community. And what you see in the bottom right in that picture looks like a very nice, it's actually a small piece of a very large lounge on the first floor of the apartment complex. But maybe the next slide, Tiana. What you don't see there is all the other stuff that makes up the resiliency center and the whole concept of community solar and resilience at the Maycroft. You see on the top left, Maycroft Apartments post rehab. Bottom left, you see the solar panels that are on the rooftop that, combined with other new partners projects, direct all of the benefits from solar on their rooftop and some of our rooftops to the residents of the Maycroft. Community solar was imperative for bringing more. You'll find in Washington, D.C., because of the density of buildings, you can rarely generate enough solar on the rooftop of any affordable housing project, maybe other than Darian Crimmins' gigantic Atlantic Terrace, and Don Hayes is going to be speaking soon, Worthington Woods project. But that's rare. And so community solar allows amalgamation of solar from different sources to serve communities in a way that we're able to make sure that all of the residents there are taken care of through solar. And through the battery storage system that's on the ground floor, all of the energy that's generated by the rooftop array that you see in the bottom left, it is first used to charge and keep charged a battery system. It becomes an energy backup system, and in the event of a grid outage, there's an islanding of the battery system, and all of the solar from that point continues to charge the batteries, and they're used to power that room that you saw at the beginning, and you see a little bit on the bottom right. It's a large room that becomes a resiliency center, and it has enough power to generate electricity for cell phone charging. It's got refrigerator that's powered for insulin and other life-saving projects. It's a communication center, ventilation, and enough to keep the project going for 3 days is the way that's modeled. So we're all very proud. Jim, we couldn't have picked a better guinea pig than you guys. Because actually I think we were actually the guinea pigs in that. But or collectively. So it's a concept I want the audience to really keep in mind, that beyond, it's an example of beyond using solar for just the traditional use, it can be channeled through this sort of creative structuring into providing resilience to the community. So Tiana, I think we're done with that slide. Thank you. Don Haig, I'd like to now turn to you, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit about MHP, the company as a whole, and how you came eventually to incorporate solar, think about incorporating solar into your work, and then we'll get into a specific example I think the audience will really enjoy.
Thank you, Jeff. It's very nice to be on the panel. Pretty much everything I've learned about solar up until today, I learned from you and Herb, and I'm finding out that there's not that much left that you guys didn't already teach me. So, but it's great to listen to everybody's experiences, and I'm just fascinated by this resiliency center thing, and would like to learn more about that sometime, down the road. MHP, where I work for MHP as a consultant, they're an affordable housing provider based largely in Montgomery County, owns about 2,200 apartments, and it's basically looks at their mission, not unlike Jubilee's in certain respects, that there's not only the affordable housing aspect of the whole thing, but a big part of it is providing resident services, sort of helping people in a holistic fashion, and then also working with neighborhoods to try to uplift, upgrade, speak for neighborhoods that may not perhaps always have a voice, and that's part of this equity thing that we're also talking about today as part of this program. About 4 years ago, MHP decided to venture into the district from a strategic planning standpoint, and we'd figured, if you're going to go in, go big. So we put under contract Worthington Woods, which is 394 apartments, and there's a slide of it that we have for the program here. It's 14.5 acres. Relevant to the solar discussion, there's 49 roofs. So in any event, in the course of that, we met Jeff and Herb, and they brought us up to date on this idea of solar for all. So for those and the benefits that would accrue to the residents in terms of reductions on their bills, we weren't thinking that much about us at the time. We were thinking, about the residents, and when I say us, I mean the project itself, not MHP as such. So then we of course had to go through the TOPA process, and those of you who've done this in DC know what that entails. And it generally includes the residents developing an RFP with the assistance of an attorney that they then put out to, however many groups that choose to respond. And one of the things in this RFP was, if selected, would you, the developer, participate in Solar for All? Because they were aware, the residents were aware, the residents' attorneys was aware, or somebody was aware of the Solar for All project. And so we were a little bit aware of the Solar for All project. And so we had to get, more up to speed about it, right? So we did, and clearly it's a great benefit for the residents. And so that was really the cause between, hearing about the program from Jeff and Herb and new partners, and then getting this impetus from the Residents Association and their attorney in this RFP to really dig into it. And from there, we started to explore, what it meant financially for the project, what it meant financially in terms of some of the repairs and things like that we needed to do. And it kind of took on a twofold aspect. One was the benefits to help us deal with some costs at the project, because there are 49 roofs, like I said, 10 of them leaked profusely. So those had to be dealt with. And then an earlier panelist talked about the need to put, new solar on new roofs, right? So we had to deal with that as well. And through all of that, we came to get to a solar project that is now finally underway at Worthington Woods, and we're very excited about it.
Great. So from what you're saying, let's move a little bit more specifically, Don, in terms of, you don't have to provide dollars per se, but from those last comments, what we're taking from that there could be a way of bringing financing to the project beyond just getting the residents, free solar. You mentioned the rooftops. What else, in the way of things that you want to provide to your residents? What were you able to ultimately negotiate to get financing for that provided benefits to the residents beyond their monthly benefits?
Sure. Well, this is, it's similar to what the panelist from Wesley Housing was presenting in terms of what they do, except it's a bigger project, it's a bigger scale. But part of it comes about from DHCD with their RFP process. For those of you who, we participated in the 2018 one, that was our first one. And if for those of you who recall, when we had the meeting down at the DHCD headquarters after the RFP was released, there was a discussion about encouraging, something to the effect of encouraging developers who plan to respond to the RFP to investigate the possibility of generating capital for the project through solar. And there was a contact name given for an individual at DOE, I think, or DCSEU, one or the other. And we were encouraged to speak with them. And of course, I was already talking to Jeff and Herb, so I didn't need to talk to anybody else. But we sort of had the broad outlines of the thing at that point. But for those of you who then responded to the 2019 one, if you recall, it became not so much of a, this is a suggestion, wouldn't it be nice to look into this, but more of a mandate, if you will, which is, we want to see that you're leveraging DHCD funds, and we really want you to go look into this. And if you can't, I haven't looked at the RFP since the day we submitted, which was September 30th, 2019. It was pretty much, if you don't have money from solar, then you have to sort of tell us why you don't have it, right? So we looked at it from a couple of standpoints. Was one, we knew if we were going to do solar, we had to get the roofs fixed and replaced. We knew, and then we wanted to respond to DHCD in terms of, we're getting some money to leverage your money, right? Makes sense. And then obviously overlaying all of this is the benefit of the residents. But then, and I think this is Jeff's other point, was that we saw a way to generate some extra cash flow to pay for resident services, this holistic approach to residents. And of course, that, as those of us who do this know, that capital is very, those funds are very difficult to source. You can't, LIHTC won't pay for them. A lot of times you can't build them into your project budget because your investor wants to see maximum leverage. So as soon as you put it in as an operating expense, you're, at the margin, you're reducing your loan amount. And so then they have to fund, somebody has to fund the money. The project costs don't shrink because your expenses go up, right? I mean, it's kind of, a lot of times it's the other way around, but in any event, you're talking about these, so how do you get them? Well, you go get grants, which aren't recurring, right? You do big fundraisers every year if you can pull that off, all that sort of stuff, right? But with solar, the cool thing about solar is if you could get enough scale at your project, and some of those that have already been discussed clearly have it, you can then generate, an annuity stream that goes on for 20 years, or 15 years. The terms of the agreement tend to run it for 20 years. For 20 years, that that you've got, right? That you can then, you can do anything you want with it, but really it's there to do your resident services. And the other cool thing about this annuity stream is the lender, at least in our experience, the lender doesn't want any part of it. In fact, I recall as we were going down the road with the project, talking with a HUD lender, because I was wondering how they were going to look at the need to put record a lease on the property for the solar. And so I said, well, this is what we're planning to do. And they said, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. And I said, and we're thinking about, we're going to get this kind of cash flow. And they said, oh, that sounds nice. And I said, and we're not going to use any of it to underwrite the loan. And they said, that's great. We don't want it. We don't want to hear about it, right? Do whatever you want and just make sure that we can change the lease if it's recorded before we do the financing. And so we said, okay, fine, we can do that, right? And then, and you don't want the money. And they said, no, we don't want the money. We don't want any part of it. So that way, you know, you can get this cash that is so needed to provide these services, and that gives you the baseline, and then you can do the other things to get beyond that, you know, the fundraising, the grants, the whatever it is, to whatever you need beyond that to kind of round out your program.
That's great. That's great. And yeah, just to really, you know, I learned so much from all of you guys, and the thought of really designing a program that could directly benefit the tenants in these other ways was really something that was masterful about the structure. We're really proud to be a part of that. Mark, if you're there and can put your video on, unless you had to bolt for something, we'll give you a chance to do that. And if not, we'll hopefully get you back on and ask you some questions later.
He lost in, but should be back on shortly.
Okay, when Mark comes back, we'll get back to him. So let's continue on this theme for a minute of different types of services. Jim, in the case of Jubilee, we're able to do something pretty interesting as well in the small program that you have in the townhouse or two, that you've got sort of a special population and sort of special needs. Could you describe a little bit about that and how we were able to direct some funding to that?
Sure, I lost my screen there for a minute. Yeah, so Jeff is referring to a couple of townhouses that we operate that are transitional housing for men and women who have been incarcerated. And so while the multifamily building has the whole metering issue and how do you send the power to the resident or the benefit to the resident, a group home has even a more diffuse pathway from the value that's being generated to the end user. And so it was important to us to try to solve for that. This is a community that faces more barriers than most, and so this financial benefit in a group home setting, how do we do it? And so Jeff worked, well, NP worked with Jubilee's team. I was not in those conversations, and figured out a pathway that would enable us to write a check to a graduating resident. So when someone finished their time in our transitional housing program, we are able to deliver them a check. It's often more than $100, and it is often used as security deposit for the next home, or it might be to help furnish the apartment. The first few times we were able to offer that benefit, it had sort of been packaged before residents were already in the program. They didn't know it was coming. New residents now know it's coming. But that first set of folks are like, well, what is this? What did I do to deserve this? And well, you just did the right thing enough times, and it's important that you take this benefit. And so it has been around now long enough that the housing community kind of understands it. And in the rental scenario, a new apartment renter will hear from somebody on the hallway, hey, you make sure you get that benefit, and they'll say to the property management team, are you serious? We're really going to get this annual or this monthly deduction? We say, yep. Well, in the case of the transitional housing program, folks will actually say, don't leave early, stick around long enough, earn that benefit. And it's really become a part of the culture, the positive incentive. And it's sort of how one of our taglines used to be more than housing. And it is more than housing. It's more than solar. It's now social, it's now cultural, it's now something that helps people really choose to be their best selves. And Elijah, I see you nodding. I know that's what's going on in your work too. And it's really building up the human being as well. And so I thought of this catchphrase that I'll try out on the audience here. Good energy begets good energy. So we're producing this clean energy on our roofs, and now it's making its way to end users in ways that are improving people's lives.
Great. And Jim, I'm glad we had a chance to talk about that a little bit, because one of the biggest issues when people start in community solar is the fact that when you establish this CREF, this community renewable energy facility, and you want to direct the benefits to low-income residents, it works fine for projects that have individually metered units. Each of them has an account at PEPCO. In the case of DC, it's got a number, it's registered, and you can direct the benefits that way. But what do you do in a situation where you have a master metered building? And while the two townhouses are small, they're emblematic of a whole different approach to how you can use community solar to benefit your low-income communities, in the way that Don is doing at Worthington Woods. So, but in the case of your project, because those townhouses didn't have individually metered units, in fact, there weren't individual units for each person. I understand it's more of a group home, and so the living bedrooms not in specific units that have meters. We developed the system so that we took the meter. It was the Jubilee housing meter, so it's not in the name or a number of the residents per se. It's Jubilee housing, and then we have a memorandum of understanding with Jubilee where they're going to get, depending on the number of returning citizens who are residing in those group homes, they're going to get an amount, that is, Julie's going to get an amount equivalent to what the individuals would have gotten had they had individual meters. But that goes directly to Jubilee. Jubilee controls it. And Jubilee was the one that came back, Marty Mellon and Jim came back and said, what would be really helpful is to take that money. We're not going to use it as Jubilee. We could use it, of course, we're a nonprofit, we've got a lot of costs, but wouldn't it be cool if we could take that and make accounts or sub-accounts, accounting for each of those residents for each month that they were there, and designate the amount that they would have gotten if they had energy bills. But don't give it to them every month. Put it into account, because what they really need is credit. They need credibility that they can be savers, and they need expenses covered when they move on from this transitional housing into the real world. And so I thought that it was a brilliant idea from Jubilee to do that. That can be done by anyone in a community solar context. I'd like to get back to Elijah and grid. I'd love to learn a little bit more about the mechanics of like how you find participants in your program. Sort of how are they recruited, how are they identified, and then ultimately what you want the goal to be when they are done with the cohort that they're involved with. Tell us a little bit about the life cycle of your cohorts.
Yeah, we definitely have like take a village approach. I mentioned our partners at, the Department of Employment Services. They help with recruitment. And quite honestly, a lot of the recruitment and the folks who participate in the programs are like referrals. They're former employee or former trainees or connected to grid employees. One of the great things about it is the program is that there's really this circle of life kind of approach. And don't want to get confused with Lion King or anything like that, but it's definitely like, it's this real circle of like how folks kind of like reach back and have this opportunity, and then they kind of like bring other folks in because it is an amazing program. And so a lot of it comes through referrals, folks who have gone through the program, had great experiences with both our training supervisors, as well as understanding and knowing like Grid's mission and the work that we're doing in the community. There's the technical, then there's the hands-on, because they're literally providing solar to the communities that they live in as well. And so, it's that whole, I guess, philanthropic kind of approach that folks fall in love in. And then ultimately the end game is we want folks to have jobs. That has definitely been a barrier. I was chatting with folks with someone in the chat section here about like our placement numbers. And though we've placed folks, 115 participants and graduates from the program, the number is lower as far as how many folks are still at these jobs. And it's been because, we're having this broader conversation around equity, inclusion, and diversity and access. It's great, but, we need to start to try to hopefully change some hearts, some minds, and creating some, the culture that makes folks feel welcomed. and this isn't something that we've been facing at Grid Mid-Atlantic. I've had conversations with my team across Grid in California, Colorado, and they've all faced this same barrier where they're connecting trainees with jobs, and when they get there, it's just not inclusive. They're facing a lot of racial rhetoric that, quite honestly, I definitely wouldn't want to stay in a job if I'm being called a racial slur or something to that effect. So we want folks to have jobs, and we want to connect folks, have these great job numbers, but we want to have like the positive and strong impact in the community. We want them to have a long-standing career in the solar industry.
So Elijah, when you place them in jobs, who is it that you're placing with? Do you have arrangements directly with solar installment companies, EPC contractors?
Yeah, we do. We have a very robust, and the great part about us being a part of a national affiliate is that we not only have our pool of solar employers here regionally, but we also have this national network of partners that we can connect to. And what we've started to do a lot better now is vetting. It's not just about connecting folks with jobs, but it's all through the recruitment process of having these trainees placed. And so, we're working to provide. One of the things we definitely implemented in the current cohort, and actually in the previous cohort, was EID training, not just for trainees, but we've also invited like our employment partners as well to sit in on unconscious bias training and what does equitable recruitment look like from the partner's perspective, and how we can, again, make this not just about numbers for reporting, but about like just actual impact for the trainees and the participants and ultimately the entire community.
So Don, you decided on your solar installer, your EPC contractor, developer, through an RFP process, which was a really interesting way to go in terms of getting your maximum benefit. Hey, Mark, good to have you back.
Oh boy.
No, keep cool. We're finishing one question and then it's all you, okay?
Okay, yeah. Internet was not here and at the new location, so I was up at the new location and I came back here, so I finally got back on. Sorry about that, guys.
No problem. And we'll get right to you when we finish this question in the middle of. So we're talking about Don and the fact that for his projects, he's got two he's doing in this way. He selected the solar developer through an RFP and could specify certain things in it. Don, how could you help Elijah and people like Elijah in terms of you as the owner? How can you assist in making sure that your project, includes green jobs for the local people?
That's a difficult. I wouldn't say it's difficult, but that's a question that that aspect of the whole thing is a little bit difficult to get to when you do what we did, which is we did the RFP process, as you mentioned, because we wanted to be sure that whatever proposal we got was very competitive. We don't know exactly. We MHP, most of us here that are low-income housing or affordable housing developers don't really know, exactly what the economic parameters are of solar. So, and we don't, the market changes a little bit here and there. People have different investors and things like that. So you don't really know what it is. So what if the deal that's being proposed is the best deal you can get, and you've got these various different things that you're working on, you're trying to get money to leverage DHCD, you're trying to pass through this benefit to your residents, you're trying to get money to fix your infrastructure if your roofs need to be fixed. I mean, if you do this after you've done your LIHTC syndication and your roofs are all brand new, that's one thing. If you're doing it beforehand because you need to get it done, you're working with a different thing. What you don't want to do, at least in my limited understanding of the tax code, is you don't want to do them together because you run the risk of reducing the benefit of the solar tax credit, okay? Particularly if you, the property owner, or the participant. And that's, so if you're headed down that path, consult your tax advisor so you don't do it. What we would have liked to do in the ideal world is we would have liked to have been more of a true partner where we really participated in some of the decision processes. We sort of got under the hood of the solar developer / investor and the framework they were looking at it. We were aggressive enough in what we asked for that one group that I think, Jeff, you reached out to told us we were too greedy, and so they refused to respond, which we took that as kind of a compliment because we wanted to push the envelope because of the financial needs of the project were so great. But I think it would be good if someone who heads down this path in the future could work out, could get into that more of a partnership. If you want to, it's more time on your part. You're gonna have to work more at it. You're gonna have to learn more about it. But if you look at the solar developer, they're bringing two things. They're bringing expertise on the project. They know how to design it, things like that, and they're bringing the capital. Okay, but which are both important, right? But the owner is bringing the roofs, and like all real estate, you can't replace the roofs, right? So in a way, and we're not complaining about where we ended up, but I think it would be, if you're going to head out to try to meet employment goals as well, and we really want to do that. We've got a commitment to do that. We'll see how it works out. But you might think about trying to work a little bit more on that partnership aspect of the whole thing, if you can afford it and get it done. But yes, we do have a commitment to. I just wanted to get that editorial in. We do have a commitment to provide some jobs. We are working with the solar developer to get them, and our intention is to try to offer first opportunities to people who are residents at the property. And if they take us up on it, then that's great. And if they don't, then we'll work on a broader basis, in terms of getting others, reaching out to other organizations. But the hope is that we'll get some residents enrolled in the program and get them trained.
Great. Mark, welcome and happy to have you join the conversation. We were really pleased and proud to partner with WDC Solar as the EPC contractor on our largest project, which is the top of the Ludlow Taylor Elementary School. A very tough project in many ways, but an incredibly rewarding project. But when we did that, we got this incredible twofer because we had a great experienced EPC contractor, solar installer, but you bring something to the table, Mark, when you do your projects as a developer, an EPC contractor that is fairly unique in the industry. I know Elijah works in this model some as well. But can you tell us about sort of you, your company, your workforce, and how you bring all of this together to create both solar and solar jobs?
Right. So thanks, Jeff, for having me on this panel, full of good information, good panelists. WDC Solar was started in 2009, basically out of the basement. And we wanted to bring good paying jobs in the solar industry to residents of the District of Columbia. And when we started out initially, we developed a business plan, or I developed a business plan. And in doing that research, I found that there was only about 4% of African Americans working in the industry. So that was on my mind early on as to how I could change that. Because when you look around, you see so many young men and women on the street and unemployed. So I didn't know how much I could do, but at that time I was going to put my energies into that. So I developed a business plan, and that business plan had 3 basic tenets. One was outreach, to make the community aware of the importance of renewable energy, solar energy, and how it could benefit them. So we did a lot of community workshops. church meetings, dinners, things like that, so that we could make our community aware. That was the first thing. Second thing is I wanted to create jobs, and that part of it came with job training, because we needed a trained workforce here if we were going to build systems like the one we recently built for you. And the third part of that is we wanted to be a competitor. We wanted to compete in the industry. We wanted to make sure that we had a place. And we found that place at the DCSEU and working with the people there at the time to create this low-income solar program, where we would install solar on low-income family homes at no cost. And I figured that would get us in the marketplace, and we could grow from there, which we have done. We've been growing steadily over the last few years. Last year, we installed just over 3 megawatts of solar. We have a great group of engineers and installers. We have about 27 individuals, about 90% of them we train here. And that's 27 individuals who otherwise might not have been in the industry. That's just counting the ones that work here, but we have a number of other individuals who are at DCSEU, DCRA, DOEE, and those individuals came from our training program as well. And so we continue to grow. We recently added Jeff Gilbert to our staff. Jeff is one of the guys, one of the top guys in the Mid-Atlantic region when it comes to training. But Jeff also is a great installer, engineer. We also have Paul Malone here, George Hall here. We have a great group of guys who've been around solar for many years, who manage large portfolios and are familiar with the ins and outs, DCRA, PEPCO, and those types of things. So we continue to work with people in city council, for instance. We continue to work with DCSEU, DOEE to make the industry better, and DC Housing Authority. So we just finished a cohort, and we have all of the people from the cohort with jobs. Our friend Brad Boston hired about 4 of them. And you know Brad, he's done work with you guys. I mean, it takes all of us working together to make this happen. There's enough solar, there's enough work out here in DC for all of us. And we just have to work together so that we can keep people employed and continue to work to make DC the greenest city in America. That's my goal. That's why I'm here. And that's why I will continue to be here.
That's great, Mark. And as we move toward wrap up here, one follow-up question for you, really more of a comment, but I'd love for everyone to hear what I heard probably the first time I met you, or one of the first times that Herb and I came over to your training program and spoke to your trainees, and then we had a chat afterwards. And I think it is as emblematic as anything as to what we're trying to accomplish on this panel and on this program and in our work. You talked to me about, I always thought of green jobs. It was, I've been working in and around the concept of trying to incorporate it in work for years. And I always thought about the importance of making sure that our most vulnerable communities played a part in all aspects of the new green economy, both sustainability-wise and economically. And I still believe that to my core. But you used a term and were telling me just your perspective that just has always stuck with me. And you talked about it in terms of not just protecting the environment, not just providing decent paying jobs, but in terms of changing lives because of the particular people that you were training and who they were and are and what you do for them. And I just love everyone to sort of hear briefly, because we're at the end, but your perspective on what you're doing with this type of a program, and Elijah, you as well. But I'm going to let Mark have the final word on that.
Yes. So a couple of things. One is that through installing solar through our low income program, we're able to eliminate many households' electric bill. And I get so many calls from individuals who are very happy, I'd say, that their electric bill is $2, $5. And that gives me great satisfaction. But also the fact that we have a number of guys who are returning citizens. We get guys from CSOSA, we make sure we train them, and we retrain our returning citizens. And we have about 5 returning citizens. And one thing they do when they come to work here, they promise me that they're not going to go and get in trouble again, right? We want that promise. We want them to know that we're family here and they're part of a family, and anything that concerns you concerns all of us. And we're very serious about that. And we do what we can to help. But we've had several guys who's been with us for years, started out with 0, and now they have an apartment. Guys bought cars. They're coming to work on time. They really feel like they're part of society, going to work every day at a job that they really like, working around people that they like. And it's not always easy. We have a lot of tough decisions to make sometimes. But overall, I would say that, I'm pretty happy with what we're doing here. And the last cohort, at the graduation, I had about 5 guys stand up and give their testimony. Some of them have been here 5, 6 years, but they come here with absolutely nothing. They get trained, and now these guys are making a difference. And to me, that's what the work that I do is all about. It's not how much money I make or how many megawatts I install. It's all about the people that I come in contact with and are able to change their lives for the better. And that has come on 2 sides. On the people that we install who are low income, they don't have to pay for a solar system. And for the people that we train at no cost, because they would not be able to get this training otherwise. We're able to train them and put them to work. And installing solar is really what we do. We're a great EPC. We do fantastic work here at WTC Solar. And so we just want to continue to do that, be patient, and understand that there's enough work to go around. Every deal is not going to fit us. We're okay with that. We're going to continue to be a part of this industry and change as many lives as we can for the better.
Well, thank you, Mark, and that's a great final word. And I want to thank all of the panelists. Just 4 terrific representatives of people in this industry who are doing what we set out to do in our work, which is addressing climate change, income inequality, and social justice in the work that we do. You're all changing lives, and thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you to Han again for the opportunity to present and to be a part of the discussion. And Courtney, I think my job is now to just hand it back to you to close things out.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for all of our speakers, all of our guests today, and a very special thank you to the leadership at New Partners Community Solar for your partnership on this program. We will be sending out a survey after the program. If everyone can make sure that they complete that survey, you'll have access to the PowerPoint slides as well as the recording of today's session. And we look forward to staying connected with you. So I encourage you to visit HAN's website to check out all of our upcoming programs. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you for joining.